O nā reira uia waire a teo ne tapu, ka hura tangata auta te turaki atu ki tangata atai, ka hura tangata atai te turaki atu ki tangata auta. Pērā hoki rā te kōrepe nui, te kōrepe roa, te wāhiawa, te toi awa whakamauā tama ki te ara, whakamoe tama ki te ara, no tū, no rongo, whanno, haramai te toki, o haumie, hui e, tāe ki e. E ngā mātā waka hurinoa, a rarau mai nei ki te poho o tēnei, te aroero o te rangahau, te arero o te mātauranga, nau mai, haere mai. E whakanui ana i tā tātou kaihanga, te tīmatanga me te otinga o ngā mea katoa. Koutou rā, a ngā mate huhua o te wiki, o te marama, o te rānei, e takoto tīraha mai ana ki ngā marae o te motu. Tēnā o tō whaia, e te pāpā, e Angus, takoto mai. Rātau kia rātau, tātou hoki te unga ora kia tātou katoa, hurinoa, i ngā kokonga e whā o tō tātou motu ātāhua. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Tēnā koutou, ko Kawiti Wake for taku ingoa. He uri au no te tai tokerau, kua rupe mai ki tēnei o ngā whakāturanga, hei aki, hei tautoko i te kaupapa whakahirahira nei. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for coming. My name is Kawiti Wakeford and I'll be the facilitator for this webinar today. No mai haere mai. Welcome to the Successful Learning Better Start to Literacy Approach webinar, the second in the series of webinars for the National Science Challenge. Of course, working to help children, teenagers and their whānau create the best possible start in life. Better Start has invested over $2 million to lift early literacy rates for children. Our researchers work with communities drawing together Indigenous and Western approaches to find practical, evidence-based solutions to health, well-being and learning issues. Our mission is to make a measurable difference for tamariki, improving the potential for all young New Zealanders to have a healthy weight, good literacy skills and sound mental health. With so much terrific research going on and some groundbreaking projects happening, it's important for us to share our knowledge and progress with the research community and the people our work directly impacts, including their work on early emergent bilingual children's language. There will be a Q&A session at the end of this webinar today. Please type your questions into the chat or the Q&A function of your Zoom window located at the bottom. And feel free to upvote questions submitted by others and our team will field those questions to the speakers. So just a little bit of housekeeping before we jump in. Today's webinar is scheduled to run just for over an hour, including Q&A, and all attendees will be automatically muted throughout the webinar, which will be recorded and made available to attendees following. Please share your thoughts on today's webinar in our short survey, which will be sent out hopefully towards the end of the session. So without further ado, our presenters today will be Professor Gail Gillen, Associate Professor Bridget McNeil, and Professor Angus McFarlane. Nā reira e te whaia Gail, te mokopuna o Aoraki Mauka, te manukura o Ngaitahu. I'd like to hand the toko over to you, our chair, to chair this next bit of our hui. Tēnā tātou.
Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi nui kia koutou I tēnei rā. Kia koe Kawiti. Thank you very much for that warm introduction and welcome everyone to our webinar this afternoon. It's really exciting to have you all join us and to share with you some of the findings from our Better Start Literacy Approach research. We've been thrilled with some of the results that we're coming through that we are going to share with you today. We started this challenge quite a few years ago now, and we've moved into the second phase, still continuing with the Better Start Literacy Approach. And we've been seeing coming through our research trials, even after 10 weeks of the Better Start Literacy Approach, we're getting a success rate of at least 15 to 20% more children succeeding than from their typical classroom curriculum. So it's great to see these results coming through, and we're really looking forward to sharing those with you today, as well as some of the new research projects we've got underway. So thanks to Bridget McNeil and Angus McFarlane who are joining me in this presentation today. I'm going to start off with a bit of a kōrero about a little bit of the background, and then pass to Angus for a kōrero, and then Bridget is going to finish the presentation taking us through some of our new work in the kindergarten early childhood setting. So welcome everyone. Please do feel free to use the chat, send through some comments, ask some questions, We do want this to be interactive, so we don't want to just keep talking at you all the time. So we'll take little breaks and feed through any questions or just comments, and we can address those as we go along. So sit back wherever you are and look forward to the next little while with you. Now, just to see if I can move these screens. Yes, there we go. So thinking back to why we started around this Better Start literacy approach, it really is to address the change that we know is needed at a systems level to help reduce the current education and health inequities that unfortunately are prevalent here in New Zealand. And to bring about a difference in that, we need a change at a systems level. And that starts with a really good focus on succeeding early in children's schooling. And early literacy success, we know, is a really powerful protective factor for helping young children get a great start with their education. So early literacy success predicts later literacy success. It feeds into children's motivation and self-learner perception, and then feeds in later to health outcomes and how their life course can really be positively affected by a great start with literacy. So as part of bringing about a systems change, we've worked in the first phase of the challenge and into the second phase of the challenge, looking at quite a comprehensive approach to build the foundation skills that the research shows us is so critical for early literacy success. And so at the centre we have a response to intervention approach where we're looking at evidence-based classroom instruction, followed by small group and then individual instruction, but supported with that monitoring assessment so teachers can see how children are responding. Really importantly, engaging whānau in mana enhancing ways where they feel respected and valued right from the start of their child's school experience. And working closely with our teachers around new resources and learning and professional development that's very much embedded within a culturally responsive framework. So it's quite an approach. It's not just a program to pick off a shelf and implement word by word. It's really trying to embed new practices into the classrooms and into the early childhood centres. And we're doing that in a way that we're looking at research that we've been engaged in with for many years around phonological awareness and vocabulary teaching, and using what the evidence has told us around the most effective and efficient ways to build these skills early for young children, and particularly for young children who may come into school with increased oral language needs or potential risk for dyslexia or potential risk for some reading problems. And so we've co-constructed this approach with teachers. We've taken feedback from whānau and tamariki themselves that all fed into this approach over the last 5 years in the first phase, and now we're moving into the second phase of extending that. So as you can see, the teaching focus is around phonological awareness, vocabulary, and building children's oral language, oral storytelling, oral narrative, listening comprehension, and embedding that in culturally responsive ways of practice. So just to go through how we've extended the first phase, during the first phase, we just focused in Christchurch for the pilot study in post-earthquake Christchurch, where the children were 5 and 6 years of age and were born in the year of the earthquake. So many of these children were coming in quite affected with the tremendous unsettlement and uncertainty in that post-earthquake phase, where they didn't necessarily have the same level of early childhood education that they may otherwise have had. And then we also did a case study starting to think about how Better Start would look in the Māori immersion and dual language context through Tuahiwi Marae School. But now that we're into the second phase, we've extended this research. We're already having impact through our contracts now with the Ministry of Education, who are extending the trial through into Auckland schools, as well as further schools in Christchurch. And we're starting to look at how we may use our new online assessments that we've developed through the National Science Challenge for school entry assessment. We're also extending the work into the Māori Achievement Collaborative, a partnership with principals really focused on raising achievement for Māori in the Auckland area, and with further case studies in both dual language and te reo Māori in Auckland, and also looking at a Pacifica case study. And the third area where we've extended now into tranche 2 is going younger, and really ensuring our early childhood context can enhance these oral language skills that we know are so critical for early literacy success. Just briefly on the Māori Achievement Collaborative, many of you will be familiar with this, but this is a professional development pathway for principals where they really work in enhancing their education and cultural outcomes for their Māori students. So we're working with 5 schools in Auckland who are part of the Māori Achievement Collaborative network. We've started with 3 schools, 2 will come on board next year, and so far we're engaged with 91 tamariki from those English medium curriculum that's integrating te reo Māori, as well as our case study at Newton Primary School in Auckland, where we're using Māori dual language and Māori immersion context and working with the Kaya Core and Kaiarahi to see how we can adapt and embed some of the Better Start principles into supporting children who are learning both Māori and English. So far, from the start of the National Science Challenge, we've worked with well over 1,500 tamariki and their whānau. We've got a database now and data coming in from over 1,000, nearly 5 to 6-year-old children in the new entrant in Year 1 teaching context, and our new study started this year with over 500 3- and 4-year-old children and their whānau. So far we've delivered over 40 whānau workshops, and it's been absolutely fantastic to have the involvement of our whānau, receiving their feedback and stories around how the approach is working for them and their tamariki. Importantly, the Better Start literacy approach is embedded in a very strengths-based approach to literacy instruction, really prioritising whānau engagement, thinking about how we share and foster those relationships in positive ways with young children's learning, and really looking at what children are achieving and their next steps for learning. And we've been really influenced, of course, by Angus's work around culturally responsive teaching practices and what we know works for Māori. So I'm going to pass over to Angus in a moment so that he can talk you through our next slide, which is an example of culturally responsive practices in a preschool setting, or talk to some of these aspects that have really been the foundation for our work in the Better Start literacy space. So kia ora, Angus. I'm going to pass to you for our next slide so that you can share some of the work that I know you and your team have been working on for many years in helping support our teachers' culturally responsive ways of working.
Kia ora, Gail. Ngā mihi nui ki a koe mō ngā kōrero e timatanga ai. Tēnā rā hoki koe kāwiti mō te whakatūwhiratanga o tā tātou nei hui. Kia ora everyone, it's good to be here and to talk about the opportunities that we have within this Better Start National Science Challenge and allied research projects. So I'm really pleased that we have E Tipu there as our very much foremost in our logo, the famous axiom from Sir Apirana Ngata all of those years ago. And it talks about setting foundations and growing from that in order to reach your destiny. So E Tipu E there is a beautiful partner to a Better Start, most appropriate. So Gail has already alluded to the fact that, you know, working with Māori children and their whānau is paramount on our priorities for this and other projects. So one of the biggest challenges in this country is to raise Māori achievement in literacy. And Māori are First Nations, and it seems not quite right that their literacy levels have not been where we would like them to be in days gone by. And it's still like that. So we, on A Better Start and our initiatives, are really trying to address that. So one of the ways is through the Hikaido schema, and you can see a number of domains, 7 in all. And if I refer to Huataki at the top, beginning with H, and then the next one begins with I, K, A, I, R, and O in the middle for Oranga, the pulse. That represents an ancestor called Hikaido, who in 1823 introduced a strategy that encouraged people, if they were, experiencing tough times. It was Hikaido, the great leader of the time, who we get sustenance from and who we draw ideas from for this program. So Huataki is encouraging us and learners to begin affirmatively, and particularly teachers, to come from an affirmative viewpoint right from the start. Demonstrate assertiveness is ihi, and when we were putting this program or this book together, we were wondering, do we really need assertiveness at this age for these young children, these tamariki? And we took it out to the kindergartens, particularly Northern Kindergarten Association, and they came back to us and they said, no, assertiveness is fine. Matter of fact, it might even be necessary, provided that it's disseminated, dispensed at the same time with warmth. So warm and assertiveness are beautiful partners. Kotahitanga is establishing inclusion, making the child, the reader, feel at ease, that he or she is one of a group, including the teacher and the whānau. Awhinatia is about building connections. So the interconnectedness factor is really important. Ira manaki is engendering care. Māori tamariki Māori are champions when it comes to manakitanga. They know how it feels and how it looks, and when it is present. They also know when it's not present. And when we're teaching literacy and phonological awareness, whatever our teaching may be centered on, it's manakitanga, that engendering care, that is a motivating factor. In the final analysis, we have to enhance the meaning of whatever we do. So the cognitive aspects of it are not to be denied. And this is what I love about the work that we're doing on A Better Start and our other programs, is we're enhancing the meaning. And that is what Apira Ngata wanted us to concentrate on. How about we enhance meaning for our Māori learners? In the center is the pulse, the oranga, and that is about relevance, balance of power, and scaffolding. So when our Māori learners see themselves in the material, in the reading material, when they see themselves and hear about themselves in the stories, it becomes more relevant. And when it's relevant, they're more motivated. And when they're more motivated, then they learn. Because my theory is that if you're not motivated, chances are learning is going to be a really, really difficult experience. A balance of power allowed them to share their stories, to share their pepeha, their maunga, their awa, and then it becomes more of a partnership. And again, you know, when we took it out to the teachers, they said, no, leave it in. We thought that it sounded a little bit strong, but it's cushioned, if you like, softened, if you like, by relevance and scaffolding. So scaffolding, that old Vygotskian concept of helping them through. We all need help. And in this program as well, scaffolding is paramount. So I'll leave it at that and pass it over to my colleague, Bridget.
Oh, kia ora, thanks Angus. Just before we go to Bridget, Kawiti, is there anything coming on the chat? I seem to have been lost off the chat somehow, so just whether you want to make any comment of anyone's coming through, any questions?
Not any questions so far, but just to note, just to encourage people, if anything does crop up for you, please do just chuck in any comments, any reflections. We're definitely wanting to make this more of a conversation than a Q&A as such. So keep them rolling through.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Angus, and really great to embed the work that we're doing in the work that you've done for many years, looking at the most effective ways to enhance culturally responsive and inclusive teaching practices. And so the findings from our Better Start National Science Challenge that have been involved with the Better Start literacy approach, what we've just analysed recently is being able to show that the pilot studies we've been able to replicate. So we had really strong finding from the pilot study around the Better Start literacy approach compared to current classroom practice. And of course, current classroom practice does embed many effective practices, and our teachers are doing a great job. So we can see the red line, strand B children in this second study, where that children, of course, are advancing in their word reading ability. And that's because teachers are doing a good job in their current work. But with the Better Start literacy approach, which has a more systematic focus on phonological awareness, vocabulary, and oral language, we can see that we get accelerated progress. And there is a significant difference between those children who received the Better Start literacy approach after 10 weeks of teaching and their word reading compared to strand B. And then at time 3, you can see strand B then got the Better Start literacy approach and they caught up to where strand A was. So this data is showing a nice clear treatment effect that the Better Start literacy approach is adding to current good practice and helping to ensure more children are succeeding. It's accelerating their early literacy development, as I mentioned, even after 10 weeks of teachers implementing the approach.
Beautiful, Gail. Hey, I just wanted to, interject and say, to ask if there were any little gems of examples or feedback that you had from any of those teachers and or tamariki themselves.
Yes, well, good question. The tamariki are really enjoying the new reading books that we've developed with them. So the current reading series, there's one in the schools, but as part of the Better Start literacy approach, we develop new readers that are more systematic in their introduction of phonological word patterns, but they're also really nice New Zealand stories. So they meet Weka the chick and Peka Peka the bat and Manu, and they're really embedded in New Zealand stories, tama, and stories that children can relate to. So we've had a lot of positive feedback for the children saying they love the stories, they love playing the games, and parents have noticed how quickly children are really starting to use their skills at home when they bring the reading books home and having a go at sounding out the words themselves. And Bridget might like to comment around the teachers noticing it changing to spelling, aren't they, Bridget?
Yeah, kia ora, Gail, and thanks so much for that question, Kawiti. That gives us an opportunity to create more of a bit of a discussion as well. Yeah, for teachers, we see really strong feedback from about, I would say, 3 weeks into the approach, and the feedback usually isn't expected from the teacher's end because they're thinking about working on these skills that are really important for reading, but what they see really, really quickly come through is in the children's writing. So when children are writing at school, all of a sudden they're able to have a go at writing or including any word that they might have in their oral vocabulary in their writing. And so all of a sudden the writing gets a lot more interesting. Children are, have the skills to give it a go. And also sort of linking back to what Angus was saying about relevance, children are, have the skills to be able to write the stories that mean something to them and that can sort of communicate something about their lives. So that's some really positive early feedback we have from Kaiako as well.
Yes, and building that nice self-confidence, and I know we'll have participants interested in children's mental well-being and healthy well-being online today, and teachers are noticing that they get they're gaining confidence quite quickly in their literacy and are motivated to join the group. So some tamariki they've had before that were very reluctant to have a go at reading are gaining confidence quickly because they're getting success quickly. And
questions. Sorry, Gail. I just seen some questions coming through that you might want to respond to in the moment. We have one from Marguerite, who asked just, were you surprised that Stand A didn't continue on their trajectory on the data at all?
Well, they've continued. I'll just pull that aside. Yes, they have continued to grow, but as we see, Strand B are catching up. So that Strand A haven't stopped growing, but of course, this is for children from new entrants. So that first initial period, as you can see for both Strand A and B in that first 10 weeks, is quite accelerated growth when children come into school, particularly for children with lower levels of oral language, because of course our classrooms are really rich language classrooms. And you would expect over time, as we're measuring their reading, that they're not going to keep on that really high accelerated rate. They will flatten a little bit. But most importantly, we've seen that they are continuing to continue on in the second 10-week period, where teachers are using other curriculum aspects as well. So we see a strong treatment effect there for Strand B coming in new to the approach. So they get that nice accelerated line when the more focused approach is occurring. But thanks for that question. Really, really nice question around the data.
Gail, I wonder if you can see Q&A questions popping up on your end at all.
Now I can. Great. Thank you. Good. Okay, we'll come back to some of those too. What I wanted to get distracted with the questions quite quickly, don't you? I'm just going to move on to the next slide for a moment. That seems to have frozen there. Next slide. There we go. Wanted to talk to you a little bit about the online monitoring assessment tools that we've developed as part of the Better Start National Signs in the first phase in phonological awareness, letter sound knowledge, a really novel task in oral storytelling, so hearing children retell stories and analysing their stories, and also in integrated reporting. And we won't have time to go into all of that today, but we're getting some really very positive feedback from teachers about if they start monitoring children's development with quick, easy to use assessments, how powerful that is for them to adapt their teaching in the moment and plans as they go forward. So in thinking about, there's a lot of talk around the country at the moment around potential school entry assessments, both for education and new assessments, maybe looking at health. And these are discussions happening at the moment. So we've been thinking about what that might look like for early literacy. And we wanted to have the minimum number of tasks possible. We don't want our little tamariki spending hours being assessed when they come into school. That's not what it's about. So we've just picked a couple of tasks that we know are really strongly predictive of early literacy success. But rather than seeing them as just a straight baseline assessment, a one-off assessment, the real power happens when we follow the children and can do these assessments quickly after about 10 weeks, and then again after 20 weeks, and then again towards the end of the year. In other words, we're tracking children's progress. So we can see, even if a child comes in with quite low level skills, how quickly they're responding to quality instruction. Or even a child coming in with higher skills, just that they are also accelerating and improving in response to instruction. So just to give you an example, and this is a nice way of really celebrating success with whānau, so that you can show you're not focused on where their skills at school entry, you're focused on how they've improved after just a short period of teaching and celebrating that improvement with their whānau. So this is a task that we use online. It's a simple game activity that children can do on an iPad, looking at their initial phoneme identity, identifying the first sound in a word, which is really necessary when it comes to learning to decode and to spell. And you can see at school entry, this is for 5-year-olds, that you get this huge variability, which we know, and which is a challenge when you're a Year 1 teacher. You've got children with wildly different, a wide range of skills coming into school. And just with quite a limited number there, significantly above chance on this task, because there was they had to select the answer out of one answer out of 3. But you can see here, just after 10 weeks now, we look at quite a different pattern. So now we have many more children above chance level, and immediately the teacher has a much smaller group of children to focus attention on to be developing these skills, rather than that big range we saw just 10 weeks earlier. So by being able to do these tasks online that children can almost self-administer, the teacher gets good feedback about how they're tracking in response to teaching. And here's another example at school entry of a task important for reading and spelling, being able to blend sounds together to form words. Again, this wide variability at school entry. After 10 weeks of the Better Start approach, we see now that we've got, 73% above chance after the Better Start literacy approach, and that compares to 50% above chance if they had other types of phonological awareness programs. So we're getting about a 20%, over a 20% improvement from the Better Start approach to other types of curriculum approaches. And statistically, we can see again this accelerated growth for children in Strand A after 10 weeks of that teaching. And importantly, the teachers get immediate feedback. So this, the teachers log on and they will have a sheet like this on their computer screen where they can look at a dashboard for each child, what their responses were to each task, how they were going, item by item an analysis to see if what they were finding easier and what they were finding harder. And so this type of immediate feedback for teachers, an integrated reporting system so they can feed out a report for whānau to share these results with whānau over that period of time, has really been quite powerful in helping to really respond to children early in their literacy start. So just pausing on that for a moment and seeing if there are any other comments or questions before I pass to Bridget now for the second part of the presentation, moving us into the early childhood space.
We actually have quite a few questions there, Bridget. Gail, if you'd like to open the Q&A, maybe some of those maybe choice questions for this.
Yes, okay, yes, I can see these now coming through. Yes, wondering what happens with the if extra support occurs over the 20 weeks. Yes, so after we see children that might not be responding so well to classroom instruction, we then move down into more small group teaching, so tier 2 if you like. So at this point we'd have additional support coming in with often just more intensive practice at the same types of activities as in the classroom level work, but now at a smaller group and more focused small group reading. So we do put in further support after that period of time, and then again monitoring by the end of the year, identifying children that might need more individualized support as well. How receptive have the teachers been to integrating more systematic approach to phonological awareness and phoneme awareness is another question coming in. We've found the teachers have really enjoyed the more systematic approach because they're seeing the children respond quite quickly. But a big difference between our Better Start literacy approach and other teaching approaches is that we really focus on helping children transfer their phonological awareness skills to the reading and writing process. Because sometimes teachers, there are programs that are very skill and drill based, that children get good at phonological awareness, but actually they're not using those skills when it comes to reading and spelling. And for us, that's not a success. We really want them to be able to use those skills to decode words and to spell words. So great questions, thank you. Keep them coming in, and we'll keep looking at those as we move forward. But that's been really extended work from our year one, our phase 1 project that we've extended into phase 2, just refining, replicating, moving this work now into more Māori context as well. But the other big part of the project for the second phase is thinking about even earlier, how can we support those oral language skills develop before children approach literacy instruction. So I want to pass now to Bridget, kia ora Bridget, to take us through some of the work that we're currently doing around early childhood.
Kia ora Gail, and kia ora koutou to everybody out there, and it's great to see the chat. We started off quiet, but boy did the Q&A start coming in, and I'm feeling a little flustered. I thought the first part I'd just be able to sit back and listen to my lovely colleagues, but I've been trying to answer as much as the Q&A coming in typed, so just keep it coming in because it's great to see it being so interactive. As Gail said, I'm going to be talking about one of our new projects for this phase of Better Start, where we're focusing in at the early childhood level. So really the aim of this particular research is to foster key, sort of the development of key areas in 3- and 4-year-old children. And really the emphasis of starting earlier in terms of supporting young children's language development and their self-regulation really came about from our first phase of work in Better Start, where we'd had some really great results working in the early years of school. But when we went back out to stakeholders, we kept getting that question, well, what would happen if that investment and that approach also went about in the early childhood years? And that's really the emphasis, or how this particular project came about. So we're interested in supporting children's oral language and their self-regulation in their early childhood period. And we're really also really interested in understanding more the relationship between children